home. Of course, if you were Hindu, born in India in those days, London would have been quite foreign. To be at home means one's own neighborhood, one's native land. The opposite of being at home, to be domestic, was to be abroad. The British Secretary of State, for example, with all the embassies all around the world, is called the Home Office. So I guess they see it as their job to make those Brits feel at home when they're away from home. It was 1851 when the word home began to refer to an institution, any institution that provided refuge, rest, or care. And you know, we still use that connotation in a nursing home, or an old folks' home, or a funeral home. That's not really a nurturing dwelling place anymore, is it? In 1855, just 7 years before our church was founded here in Alpena, the word home became attached to games, sports. Do you remember playing Alla Oxenfree? It's a form of tag. And if you got to that tree or you got to that rock that served as home, you could not be tagged out. I'm safe. I'm home. In baseball, if you made it safe to home base, your team got the point. Home became a safe place as well as a goal that you were striving toward. When you were home, you were safe from attack. Home is that place where you feel safe. When team sports began to be played in matches, they alternated between localities of each side. The host location was called the home team. And sports commentators even now refer to the home team advantage. So every season, here the Alpena High School Wildcats play some home games and some away games. So the word has expanded its connotation. You're either playing a home game at home or you're away. You're one or the other. And you know, there's one more figurative use of the phrase going home. And it came into vogue about 100 years ago. It's in reference to the grave, or better said, to the future state of life that is beyond the grave. In the sweet by and by, when we meet on that beautiful shore, will the circle be unbroken in the sky, Lord, in the sky? Oh, when the saints come marching in, oh, when the saints come marching in, Lord, I want to be in that number when the saints go marching in. Or as in today's anthem, I'm going there to meet my mother. I'm going there no more to roam. I'm going over Jordan. I'm going home. Home. The place from which we came, from God, to which we shall all of us one day return, the great equalizer, home. You know, I have no fear of death because I believe we are just going home. Despite all the nervous anxiety, all the challenges of moving to a new place, you know, it's not always that strange. Have you ever gone someplace new, and when you got off the plane, or you set your foot on the soil, somehow you feel you've been here before? There's something in the air, something that just seems right. You feel at home. It's kind of like deja vu. But then you wonder, how can that be? I've never been here. But maybe it's because the blood of our ancestors still flows in us. And from time to time we feel it. Because they were here before us. And maybe it's because we've heard stories about this place or another. And it feels good finally to be there where it happened. I felt that way the first group I took on a tour of Israel. The Holy Land, the footsteps of Jesus. I felt at home everywhere we went, and I had never been there. or to stand where somebody that we've heard about actually lived. Colonial New England is a bit like that for me. Whenever we go out to visit my brother Sky in Concord, where the shot was heard around the world, Walden Pond, all those places that we lived with in our growing up years but never visited. I think part of the glue that holds us together as a people are our stories of origin, the stories we hold in common. We share the Mayflower adventure, for example, even though many of us never have been to Plymouth Rock. We feel a kindred spirit to those Revolutionary War stories, even though we've never been to Boston. We feel emotion, we feel awe when we see photos of the Washington Monument or the Lincoln Memorial, even though we may never have visited our nation's capital. And we certainly never met any of those august characters in life. As people move around, we take our stories with us. And in that regard, I don't think that we're all that much different from our biblical ancestors. Home was where your tribe's roots were. To be dislocated from home was bearable if you could at least maintain the common story. One of the hardest things to endure was to be forcibly removed from one's home, from one's homeland, and exiled into a strange land, a foreign people, foreign culture, foreign language, foreign foods. To become refugees in a foreign and alien place. Well, such was the traumatic situation in the late 6th century BCE when an arrogant and rebellious Jerusalem stood up against the Babylonian Empire, and the empire struck back. Thousands of Judeans were killed in that war. Many of the leading citizens of the city of Jerusalem were taken as prisoners of war to Babylon. And it was the first phase of what became known later as the exile, or the Babylonian captivity. And what the Bible refers to as the exiles, those were Jewish citizens who had been forcibly removed from Jerusalem by the armies of the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, about more than 500 years before Jesus Christ was born. They were refugees, much like we see coming out of the civil war in Syria and from the Islamic insurgencies in Iraq today, except that their war back then had been decisively lost. These exiles were prisoners of war. These exiles in Babylon included Israel's king Jehoiakim and his mother, the widow of the former king Josiah. All of the government leaders and the priests, which included the prophet Ezekiel and Daniel, who was disciplined by being thrown into a lion's den. They took with them into captivity all the skilled laborers and the craftsmen, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who ended up in a fiery furnace. These had been the leading citizens in Jerusalem. These had been the best families. These were the top of the heap. Oh, how the mighty had fallen. In this most hopeless of situations, the prophet Jeremiah sends a letter in which he advises these exiled families, and I quote, "Build houses and make yourself at home in Babylon. Put in gardens and eat what grows in that country. Marry and have children, and encourage your sons and daughters to marry as well and to have children of their own, so that you will thrive in your new nation. Make yourselves at home there and work for that country's welfare. Pray for the well-being of Babylon. For if things go well for Babylon, things will go well for you." Those words make me think of what's called trickle-down economics, right? The notion that when things go well for the elite families, when things go well for the wealthy class who govern, for the big landowners and corporations and businesses, then some of that great abundance will trickle down to the rest of us consumers. Or it's like the old saying that a rising tide lifts all boats. When things go well for the Babylonians, things will go well for the exiles too, says Jeremiah. But Jeremiah also put a timeline on the captivity. They would be there for 70 years. Now, people worried about the exile lasting that long. All the false prophets and false teachers, the one that the letter says do not listen to them because they're lying, were saying any day now God's going to come and save us. God's going to send a Messiah. God's going to break in here. He's going to loosen our chains. We're going home. Just any day now. You just wait. You just see. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. And Jeremiah wrote and said, no, you'll be there for 70 years. So start planning on that. They were worried about the exile lasting that long. That meant a whole new generation of children would be born who, as adults, would have no memory of what it had been like in their home. Like so-called dreamers in American immigration politics. Those young adults who came to the United States as children of immigrants, or who were born here, who have no memory of some other homeland than here, where they grew up. The Jews in exile were afraid that the grandeur and the memory of Judaism and Jerusalem's temple, as well as all their biblical traditions of the elders, would be lost if the exile went on for so long. After 70 years being away from home, what people meant by the word home will have displaced its meaning. We see it in the immigration patterns in our own day. By the second and certainly by the third generation that's living away from their homeland, where they came from is no longer felt as home. I mean, just think here in Alpena. Think of the French and the Irish lumbermen. Think of the Norwegian and the Polish settlers here in Alpena. Think of the Germans and the English. Their kids and their great-grandkids feel more like natives. They're born here. They're at home here. This is the place where they settled. So it should be no surprise then for us who are second or third generation immigrants that they feel like they should belong to the new homeland. They should be just like their neighbors. They should not be discriminated against because they came from a different country or a different culture or a different language. They've been here for 2, 3 generations. Come on. One people.